WuSA, wake up South Africa. WuSA, wake up South Africa. You've been sleeping far too long. Wake up South Africa.
Draganya gonna go to Goloruharam, Goranga Gudachama Gopya Kopa Briksham, Gopala Gada Ratidam Yati Singha Gora, Govinda Deshi Kavaram Satatam Namami. Uttama Adama Kichuna Bachila, Chachiya Dile Kakola. Kahe Premananda Emana Gauranga Hridoya Dariya Bola Bhaja Gauranga Kaha Gauranga Laha Gaurangera Namare Jai Jana Gauranga Bhaje Se Hoya Mara Pranare Yeshaiva Padambu Bhakti Labhya Prema Bidana Parama Pumata Tasmai Jaganmandala Mandalaya Chaitanya Chandraya Namo Namaste Chaitanya Chandraya Namo Namaste Chaitanya Chandraya Namo Namaste Madhavirapi Gopala Sri Kuryat Kripaya Judi Tadaiva Sambhaya Pidva Vishayusta Kriya Janaha Shri Krishna Krishna Chaitanya Sasanatana Rupaka Gopala Raghunatha Brajabhava Vanchakopadarubhishcha Kripa Sindhu Vyahivachan Patitanam Bhavanebhyo Vaishnavadevyo Namaha Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadha Srivasadi Gaura Bhaktivinoda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. So good morning, devotees in South Africa. I want to talk to you today something about a really important topic, which is enthusiasm. Now, most people today think that enthusiasm comes from drinking coffee or maybe from drugs or, or when you see that girl or that boy, then you become very, very enthusiastic. But that's not what we consider to be enthusiasm. Because Krishna in the Gita, he says, Labhanti Brahma Nirvanam, Nisaya Sina Kalmasa, China Dvaita Yatatmana, Sarva Bhuta Hiterata. That there's some dualities that arise, and these dualities, they come from doubts. And Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur, Balaji Vidyabhushan, comments on this verse. He says, China Dvaita Vinasta Samsaya. That persons who had all their doubts destroyed, that's real enthusiasm. Otherwise, we all have some dualities. We all have some, well, I don't really know. We have some anxieties. We have some depression. So many problems come. So in Rupa Goswami, in his Upadeshamrita, he also speaks about this in the third verse. One of the most important instructions he gives, he says, Utsahan, first thing. He speaks about Sadbir Bhaktir Vinyat Prasiddhati, 6 things which are required to become successful in bhakti. And the first of those is Utsahan. Now, Utsahan is an interesting word. Prabhupada translates it as enthusiasm, but the word Utsaha literally means power or strength or some effort. Just like in the Chaitanya Bhagavat, there's a description given of the Chandkazi and how he saw that the followers of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, all of a sudden they had so much utsaha or enthusiasm or strength to execute their Hindu or their bhakti principles. And he was confused. Where did they get this from? So this is our topic we want to speak something about today. How can we develop that utsaha? Is drinking coffee the only way to get up in the morning? And there's people, they have machines, you must know, alarm clocks that hook up to your coffee machine. So you can wake up with the smell of coffee. Otherwise, some people just can't get up in the morning unless they smell that coffee. So what is it that's secret to utsaha? Now, Prabhupada, in his commentary in Nectar of Instruction, he says, he speaks about enthusiasm. He says, one should accept this opportunity to return home back to Godhead very enthusiastically. Without enthusiasm, one cannot be successful. Even in the material world, one has to be very enthusiastic in his particular field of activity in order to become successful. A student, businessman, or artist, or anyone else who wants success in this line must be enthusiastic. Similarly, one must be very enthusiastic in devotional service. So that enthusiasm requires other things. As Rupa Goswami says, utsahan nishtayad. Nishtayat means confidence. I can get up in the morning with great enthusiasm to jump out of bed. But if I happen to be a rock climber and I'm sleeping on the side of a cliff, like sometimes they do if they're climbing up real high, I may not have confidence to jump out of my bed. It may not be the best idea. So enthusiasm requires some confidence. And we've all seen that in our practical activities. You can't just tell someone what to do. This is a problem a lot of times that managers have, both in our movement and outside of our movement, is they just want to, you're supposed to do it. They just say, just do it. And you say, well, why? Well, because I said so, that's why. But that's not a very good answer. When we have confidence in that person, then we can have utsaha, then we can have enthusiasm. When we have confidence in the process that this is going to be successful for me, then I can be enthusiastic. And the third quality, he says, is daryat. Daryat means that we should be very, very patient. Daryat. It's going to take some time. Sometimes we see people come. I've seen a lot of new people come to the movement, and they're just so enthusiastic, and they think, man, I'm going to be like an incarnation in 1 week, and probably I'll become a GBC and sannyasi, in 5 days and whatever. And then they lose their enthusiasm because they don't get the results that they're looking for. And Bhaktivinoda Thakur has written a series of articles which Srila Bhaktisiddhanta later printed under the title of Bhakti Tattva Vivek. Bhanuswami printed an English translation of that. And he says that we have to understand why it is that we're not progressing properly. If we don't understand what it is that's holding me back, then I may have doubts in the process. I've been here now for 2 weeks. I'm chanting Hare Krishna, and I haven't seen Krishna yet. Nah, I don't think that this works. So that utsahan, it's also dependent on confidence. It's also dependent on patience. Tat tat karma pavartana. We have to engage in activities that are favorable, proper activities. We have to have a proper process that we're enthusiastic for. And then Rupa Goswami says something very important, that sangha tyagat. We have to give up the association of non-devotees. I remember some years ago, we were in Nepal and we were staying at the temple, and I like to hike and explore. It's always been part of my nature. And just behind the temple, there just the mountains were going up into the Himalayas there. And we went for a walk one day, more like a climb. And as we were going, we got leeches on our body in different places. So those leeches are very difficult to get off. Those leeches will drink your blood. And if you have that leech on your body, it's ultimately going to take away your strength. And therefore, Rupa Goswami, he's not saying this because he hates non-devotees, or not saying it out of a sense of fanaticism or anger, but he's saying Sangha Tyagat. You have to give up association with the wrong type of persons. And Sato Britte, Sata means the Sat Janas, which Prabhupada translates, our Acharyas translate, as the previous Acharyas. Sato Britte means to follow. When we follow those previous Acharyas, then we can have confidence, then we can have enthusiasm. Just like you're going through a deep forest and you don't know the path, but if you see, just like sometimes we would go for walks in the forest next to Jagannath Puri, there's a wildlife preserve there. And you can walk for maybe 4 hours or more and not see anyone. In India, you'll have some culture shock because it's a very rare thing that you can go for so long without seeing anyone. So when we first started going into that forest and we didn't know our way, we had some idea of direction, but what I would always look for is some footprints on the ground. And the more footprints that you see, the more confident you are in the path. So this is Sato Britte, that I want to know I'm on this path. I want to have some enthusiasm, but that requires some nishta, some confidence. So if I see that many people previously have achieved perfection by following this particular path, then I can be confident, then I can be very enthusiastic. So there's a commentary. I'd like to read you a little something from several commentaries on this verse. The first is from the Upadesh Prakashika Tika, which is written by a Vaishnava a few hundred years ago, who was in the line of Radharaman, the Radharaman temple in Vrindavan, in the line of Gopal Bhatta Goswami. And he says that the word utsaha, enthusiasm, means being very eager to perform the activities of sadhana, which enhance bhakti. And he says nishchaya, meaning conviction, means firm faith. Dharya means that you don't slacken, you don't let up on the execution of the limbs of bhakti, even if there's some delay in obtaining the desired goal. So that's very, very important. We have to be very, very eager to perform our devotional activities, but it's not so easy, is it? Sometimes we just rather sleep in some mornings. Sometimes we'd rather just get up, and maybe some of us, let's just be really honest, maybe instead of getting up and chanting japa, I'd rather just watch television, or I'd rather just have breakfast in bed, or do this or that, or why do I want to go see the devotees for? I want to go see, there's this really nice boy, he wants to take me out to the movies. That sounds a lot more exciting. Or this beautiful girl that I want to see. And we lack that desire to be enthusiastic in performing our bhakti. And again, a lot of that comes because of our association. And therefore, Srila Prabhupada created temples. I'd like to say a little something personal about temples. For those of you who know me, I think there's a few people here in the group right now who used to do a Purushottam Prabhu. We should understand Srila Prabhupada's purpose in creating the temple, because sometimes devotees are not enthusiastic about staying in the temple. It used to be, I joined the temple in 1982. And even at that time, that was after the explosion, the Hare Krishna explosion in the late 60s and early 70s and 70s. Even at that time, it was kind of cool and hip to live in a temple, live in a monastery, and it may still be in a few places. But for most people, it's just like not an option. You know, who wants to do that? Who wants to live in the temple? I mean, I want to be a real person. But yeah, it's nice to go to the temple and associate with the devotees. Srila Prabhupada, in one place, he said that we've created this Krishna consciousness movement to give people the opportunity to associate with devotees. That's our purpose of this movement. That's the purpose of the temples. Because most of us, when we're beginning our practice of bhakti, it's not natural for us. We just don't want to get up at 4 o'clock in the morning. There was one during the 70s in America, during the time of the Vietnam War, many people were joining the Hare Krishna movement. And so much so that the FBI became suspicious because a lot of people were getting out of the draft. They were avoiding going to war because they said, I'm joining the Hare Krishna devotees, and Hare Krishnas, they don't believe in war, so I can't be drafted. So finally they sent a spy to the Honolulu temple in Hawaii. And he went to the Sunday Feast program, and he acted like he had utsaha, enthusiasm. And he was dancing in the kirtan and singing real loud. And then he sat down to take prasadam, and some devotees sat next to him. And he was telling him, wow, you know, I really have a lot of enthusiasm. This is really good. And, you know, how do I join you guys? And they said, no problem. You just come over here. We're going to shave your head, and you can stay the night, and we'll put you in the Bhakti program, and no problem. So he stayed for about a week. And then in the middle of the night, he went to the window or whatever, and he slipped out and went back to the FBI to make his report. And when he told the FBI, he said, these people are crazy. He said, it's worse than the army. In the army, you don't have to get up until 5 o'clock in the morning, but these people get up at 4 o'clock in the morning, and some of them, God forbid, they get up at 3 o'clock in the morning. They don't drink coffee. I don't know how they manage to get up. They take a cold shower. They don't have girlfriends. They don't watch television. They don't eat meat. I don't know how in the world they can have any enthusiasm. So for materialistic people, their enthusiasm comes from all the wrong things. It comes from this misidentification of the self with the body. Bhaktivinoda Thakur comments on this third verse of the Deshamrita. He's written this commentary called Piyusha Bharshani Britti. And he says there that to maintain one's existence by some appropriate means and to cultivate bhakti are two essential activities for the devotees. He says, but we have to be enthusiastic, optimistic, patient to do that. And he defines that utsaha as eagerness again to follow the rules and regulations of bhakti. And he says, without that enthusiasm, one's bhakti will vanish. So that enthusiasm to follow the principles of bhakti comes when we associate with devotees. And this is the purpose of our temples. But it doesn't mean that everybody on the whole planet is going to have to try to cram into different temples here and there, and everybody's going to have to just give up their material life and give up their jobs, and everybody's going to go and join the temple. That was not Srila Prabhupada's concept. It was not the concept of our previous acharyas. We can practice that at home. Better, we practice that in a community. And therefore, in this concept, we see the temples like schools. And just like you go to school, at a certain point, you graduate from school. And when you graduate from school, then that doesn't mean you stay in the same school the rest of your life. A few people, very few, stay as teachers, or maybe they stay as administrators. But most people get a real life. They get a job, they buy a house, they have kids, that they think about education for their children. That's community. The principle is association. We need good association to become enthusiastic. When we stay with the devotees, when we go to the temple, maybe on the weekend, maybe we stay the night and we get up for Mangal Arati and whatever, it helps give us so much enthusiasm to see other devotees practicing this process. In his Anubhuti commentary on this verse, Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati, he defines utsaha as being indifferent to karma, gyan, and any spiritual practices that don't have the purpose of pleasing Krishna. So what indirectly, again, he's saying here, association. If you associate even with devotees who think that being a great devotee means to memorize a lot of verses and that's all that it means to be a devotee, or that to be a devotee, it means to be expert in argument and debate, or to be a devotee, it means to be expert in Varnashram Dharma and to understand my situation in Varna and Ashram. That's not utsaha. That's some mundane thing. And there is some utsaha, some power, strength within those things. But because that power, strength is based on a misconception of myself as the body, then ultimately it doesn't work. And therefore, in the first canto of the Bhagavatam, a very famous verse is there, Savai Pumsam Paro Dharma Yato Bhaktir Adhoksajay Ahoitiki Atpatita Yatmasu Prasidati. That the best thing to do is to render devotion to Krishna. But what is that devotion to Krishna? It means that one should be ahoitiki apatiyata, that it shouldn't have any other motivation, and it should never end. And then yayatma suprasidati, that will satisfy the self. But if we're working to try to satisfy our mind, if we're working to try to satisfy our body, or if we're working to try to satisfy the mind or body of someone else, that's chanchala, that's flickering. And it's going to work one day and it's not going to work the next day. And Krishna in the Gita, he says that the persons who engage in sense gratification from the beginning, middle, and end, it's just full of anxiety. So we should understand that if we're thinking that we're very enthusiastic to engage in sense gratification, but if we're working like that, then ultimately it's not going to give us its utsaha. It'll give us something which looks like some enthusiasm, but it's not real enthusiasm. So this is a great science. Instead of people drinking coffee in the morning, they should understand the principles of bhakti. They should understand the principles of how we can be enthusiastic at all times. Now, again, there's a problem here, and that is that someone may say, well, that's just really not me. I can try to behave in a certain way. And again, I've seen many devotees who join, who leap 5 feet up in the air and they chant louder than anybody else in the kirtan, and they want to practice utsaha. They want to Krishna says, Yehi samsparshadya bhova duko yonai evati ajantavanta kunte anateshi ramate buddha. Nateshi ramate buddha. The persons who are intelligent, they don't engage in the sense gratification, understanding that from the beginning, middle, and end, all that there is just unhappiness. But at the same time, I just can't do it. Some people say, I just can't get it together. I just can't stop watching television. I just can't give up this particular sense gratification or that sense gratification. And Krishna speaks about this in the Gita. Actually, this is the foundation of the Gita. The first chapter of the Bhagavad Gita is one of my favorites. And I think that's sometimes confusing for a lot of people, because for most people, the first chapter of the Gita seems kind of, well, it seems kind of boring maybe. And we want to get on with the real stuff and go to a later chapter. The first chapter of the Gita, Baladeva Vibhushan, he gives a title, he calls it Vishad Yoga. Vishad means lamentation. So literally it means, Vishad Yoga means the yoga of lamentation, or lamentation which leads me to connect with God. And Arjuna, in the first chapter of the Gita, he's full of lamentations, crying and crying. But what does he do with that lamentation? Low-class people who are having lamentation, low-class people get lamentation because they can't get their sense gratification anymore. Sometimes people, they commit suicide when their body becomes too old and they can't enjoy anymore. That's a low-class kind of person. But a high-class person will use that to call out to God. And therefore, in the second chapter of the Gita, Sanjaya, he describes the very beginning of the Gita. And he says, Vishidam tamidam vakyam uvacha madhusudana. That hearing the vakya, the words, which are Vishad, which are the lamentation of Arjuna, uvacha madhusudana. Krishna speaks Bhagavad Gita. In the language of my Guru Maharaj, Sri Srimad Gaur Govinda Maharaj, he used to say that your only qualification is your disqualification. In other words, when we're honest. In the 11th canto of the Bhagavatam, there's an important verse that Krishna tells to Uddhava, 2 verses. And these verses I found very interesting. That Bhaktivinoda Thakur, in his Bhajan Rahasya, in his book about the confidential practice of Bhajan, Bhaktivinoda Thakur gives these 2 verses. He says, these verses indicate our qualification for chanting the holy name. Wow, okay, that's pretty important, right? What are those verses? Jata Shradho Matkatasu, Nirvina Sarva Karmasu, Veda Dukatmakam Kaman, Parityage Pranishvara, Satoba Jitamam Vrita, Shradava Dvidanishchaya, Jusamanas Chitan Kamam, Dukodarkam Stragarhayan. Jata means to take birth, or it means someone who is waking up. Jata Shradho, in the beginning, someone has faith. Matkatasu, in Krishna Katha. And we see, I've met a lot of devotees, a lot of people who have faith in the philosophy of Krishna consciousness. But here Krishna tells Uddhava, Nirvina Sarva Karmasu. They understand, Nirvina means that they're disgusted, that they don't want to do Sarva Karmasu, all these activities of sense gratification. Veda Dukatmakam Kama, they understand that all this sense gratification is just duk. It's going to bring me so much misery and unhappiness. But parityage pyanishvara, they can't give it up. So what should they do? This is pretty much all of us in the beginning, because we're captured by a ghost. There's a ghost who's entered into our bodies and is wanting to enjoy in different ways. But the nature of a ghost, he can't enjoy on his own. He can't touch, he can't do anything. So when we try to enjoy sense gratification, it's like a ghost trying to enjoy, because ultimately there's no enjoyment there. But like the ghost, we can't give it up. We're like a person who's haunted. So Krishna tells Uddhava, it's okay, don't freak out. He says, Tato bhajeta mam prita, that you should go on worshiping me with some prita, some affection, with some happiness, with some utsaha. He says, Shraddha Lurjuda Nishtaya. You should have some faith and you should be very, very fixed. I'm going to do this thing. This is utsaha. This is firm determination. I must do this practice of bhakti. I must practice bhakti, no matter how difficult it is. And he says that jusamanas, even what jusaman means that someone, even while they're doing it, jusamanas tatan kaman, even while they're engaging in that sense gratification, they have this utsaha, this firm strength, this firm conviction. I'm not going to give this up. Dukkha darkams to garhayan. And while they're doing that, they can't stop that activity. They understand this is going to cause me dukkha darkan. Dukkha darkans means that it's going to bring me more misery. And so then garhayan, the Sanskrit word comes from the same word, bij dhatu is agni, or fire. That one is burning up in the fire of lamentation. And we feel really, really bad. So to feel that way, we have to have good association. If we don't have that good association, then we can't give that up. We can't give up samsaya. Samsaya means some doubts. And again in Bhagavad Gita, in chapter 4, Krishna says, Agyas chashadadanas cha samsayatma vinashyati nayam lokostinat palaro nasukam samsayatmana. He says that for someone who's agyat, who's a foolish person, who doesn't have any knowledge of Shastra, who's ashradadana, who doesn't have faith in the Shastra, for that person, there's always going to be samsaya. There's always going to be some doubts. There's always going to be some dualities. And Krishna says, samsaya, atma. Atma means that soul. Samsaya atma vinashyati. That person falls back down. He says that for such a person, nayam lokostina paro nasukam samsaya atma. For someone who has this doubts, they're not going to get happiness either in this world or in the next world. If someone really has doubts about trying to enjoy sense gratification, then how can they perform that activity? They're not going to have confidence in it. They can't act upon it. They're always going to be eaten up with some doubt. Really, I should be chanting Hare Krishna instead of being here at this stupid party with all these nonsense people. But it's very, very difficult. So we have to have association. But what kind of association? Let's go a little deeper here. We have to have association with serious persons, not just persons who are making a show. Sometimes we meet someone who's very expert in leading kirtan. They're very expert in wearing a dhoti or sari. They're very expert in dressing up, and they look enthusiastic so that they can attract people. Famously, we see sometimes brahmacharis leading kirtan while they're singing. Kind of they're looking back in the back of the room. Is she watching? Did she see me? They're doing it with apparent enthusiasm for the wrong purpose. And if we associate with those kind of persons, we're not going to have real utsaha. In the 17th chapter of Bhagavad Gita, Krishna speaks about this. He says in the 18th verse, he says, Satkara mana pujartam tapo dhambena chaiva yat kriyateta diha proktam rajasam charam adruvam. He says this is some penance, some austerities, which are done in the mode of passion. And he says they're chala, they're flickering, and they're adruvam, they're temporary. Someone who's doing it satkara, because they want some respect and mana, some honor, some puja, some worship. They want, Prabhupada translates it, that for the sake of getting respect, honor, and worship, they're engaged in devotional service. They're doing it really with damba. Dambena means with pride. And that enthusiasm, that practice of bhakti, it's in the mode of passion. It's not stable and it's not permanent. Prabhupada writes in his purport, he says, sometimes penance and austerity are executed to attract people and receive honor, respect, and worship from others. Persons in the mode of passion arrange to be worshipped by subordinates and let them wash their feet and offer riches. Such arrangements artificially made by the performance of penances are considered to be in the mode of passion. The results are temporary. They can be continued for some time, but they're not permanent. So this is the nature of passionate endeavor. This is the nature of endeavor when we're associating with people who are passionate, with persons who don't have sincerity. Someone may not know a lot of verses. Someone may not be a very good singer. They may not be very good at kirtan. They may not be a good speaker. They may not be really good at practically anything in Krishna consciousness. But if they have one quality, what my gurus used to call Atma Krandana, or the crying of the soul, or we could say sincerity. If they have that one quality, that person is good association. They're better association than someone else who might be the most expert harmonium player, most expert singer, the best manager, the most handsome, the most beautiful, the most learned, and whatever. But it's just someone putting on a show to attract people's respect and honor. So Prabhupada Nectar Devotion speaks about this also. In chapter 3, he says that anyone who has any desire or aspiration for satisfying his senses by becoming more and more important, either in the material sense or in the spiritual sense, cannot actually relish the really sweet taste of devotional service. So this is the ecstasy of insignificance. And it's a kind of ecstasy. It's a kind of happiness. Whereas in the material world, that's not considered, as they say, humility is not exactly a growth industry, right? If you want to do some business or something, being humble is not very beneficial for that in the material realm. But in the spiritual realm, the more that we become insignificant, the more that we become happy. And even if someone is trying to practice bhakti, but they're doing it on the strength of their passion, the strength of their physical ability to jump up in the morning and run and do this and that, and they're doing it to try to impress other people, Krishna says, Rajasam Chalamadruvam. It's in a mode of passion, and the results are not going to be stable, and they're not going to be permanent. So we want to achieve happiness through reality. And as it's been said, that reality, no matter how discouraging, no matter how depressing reality may be, it's always preferable to illusion, no matter how inspiring the illusion may be. This is the problem, is that we're very inspired because we think, I'm probably the next incarnation. I've got a great career here in ISKCON, and I'm going to make lots of money. I'm going to become really, really famous. And thinking I'm going to get those things gives me some kind of enthusiasm. But then when I don't get those things, then I become very, very depressed and I want to leave. So real happiness comes through reality. And that reality, no matter how depressing it may be, it's preferable than illusion. And it's preferable for our enthusiasm, because our only qualification is our disqualification. This is Vishad Yoga. This is the practice of yoga with sincerity, to be who I am and not live in an illusion, a very maybe apparently enthusiastic illusion, and an illusion which gives me so much strength because I'm becoming famous and everyone's giving respect to me, but it's illusion because it's not really me. When I live in a world like that, then I can't go on. I'd like to sing a little song to you. This is from Thakur Bhaktivinoda, from his Saranagati. He sings, Garita Achare Rohi Lama Moji Nakori no Sadhu Sangha Lohi Sadhu Beshani Upadeshi Eboro Mayada Ranga Hari Hey. Oh my dear Lord Hari, this is my situation. My Guru Maharaj used to say that Krishna likes confessions. And Bhakti was singing, Garita Achare. My achar, my behavior is very, very bad. Rohilam emoji. I'm always doing very terrible things. Nakorinu sadhu sangha. I never associated with sadhus. When sadhus were there, I just wanted to get my photograph taken with them. But I wasn't really interested in following their instructions. And he says, now, Loy Sadhu Vesh. Here I am I'm on this live Zoom meeting and I'm giving Upadesh, Ani Upadesh. I'm dressed like a sadhu. I'm giving instructions to everybody. He says, Eboro Maya Ranga. This is Maya's big joke. This is the mood of a devotee. A devotee doesn't fall into illusion, thinking that I'm a big, big person because they're asking me to give some class. Rather, we should think, I'm just dressing up in a costume, like our FBI friend who was a spy trying to spy on the devotees. And we should think that this is not really me. Rather, Bhaktivinoda, Krishnadas Kaviraj Goswami describes in Chaitanya Charitamrita, Jagai Madai Hoite Muni Se Papishta, Purishera Kita Hoite Muni Se Lagishta. He says that my real situation, I'm more sinful, Muni Se Papishta, I'm more sinful than Jagai and Madai. Purishera Kita Muni Se Lagishta. Lagishta means that I'm lower than the worms in stool. That's my real situation. The materialistic people, they can't understand that. Materialistic devotees become very depressed by that. But a sincere devotee relishes it. Oh, this is very, very good. I don't need to have this respect. Rather, it's better to be disrespected. Srila Gaurkishore Das Babaji was staying in Navadvip, and one day, one wealthy man came to see him along with his wife. And that man, his name was Girish Babu. And he saw that Gaurkishore Das Babaji was just sitting under a tree and doing his bhajan, and the terrible rains are coming down, very heavy rains in Mayapur during the rainy season. And they said, Baba, please, we want to make a little shelter for you for your bhajan. It causes us so much pain to see you suffering in the rainy season and the hot season also. And Gaurkishore said, no, I have no problem where I'm at right now. It's okay. He said, I only have one problem. And they said, oh, Babaji Maharaj, what is their problem? And Gorkeshwar told him, my problem is that so many people are coming to me and saying, Maharaj, Kripa Koro, please be merciful to me. But they're just wanting some sense gratification. They're not really interested in their own genuine benefit. They have enthusiasm for the wrong thing. And because of that, it's disturbing my bhajan. So listen, you're both coming to me. I can see you're very nice people. You're very sincere. You'd like to do something. So if you want to do something to please me, then here's what you can do. Both of you should give me a nice pile of your stool. And I can put your stool down right here where I do my bhajan. And then nobody's going to want to bother me because it's going to smell really bad. And then I'll be able to chant Hare Krishna day and night. So, yeah, then people won't want to come. And Girish Babu, she heard that, her eyes became, his wife heard that, and her eyes became very big. And she said, Maharaj, we want to follow your instructions, but if we pass stool and offer it to you where you do your bhajan, that's going to be very bad for us. You're a great sadhu. And Gorkeshwar said, no, don't worry about it. He said, I'm not really a Vaishnav. He said, you know those people who live in the big temples and they have long hair and big beards, and they're real Vaishnavas, they're sadhus. I haven't really achieved any result in my bhajan. So the place where I stay, it's perfectly qualified to get your stool. So please offer me your stool. I have nothing else I want to ask from you. And so they said, well, we can't do that, but we'll make a second house for you, make a little house, and then your servants can stay there. And they made that house, but Gorkeshwar never stayed there. Rather, he spent 6 months staying in Hare Krishna. Did you lose me very long? I don't know if any of you have been to a dharmashala in India. They're not the nicest places. They're like a place where you can stay for free or very, very cheap. And the public toilets there, they're not the nicest places in the world. And that's where Gorkeshwar Babaji did his bhajan. And he was so enthusiastic from that, because by staying there, he had no bad association. Materialistic people want to associate with someone who has a big limousine, who has guns and has beautiful women around him, who has lots of money, who has enthusiasm for material things and seems to have success in material things. And by associating with him, we think I'm also going to be successful. But it's just the opposite in spiritual realms. So we should understand that. I want to stop there. We got a few more minutes. I know probably all you guys got to go to school, you got to go to work or something. I don't want to disturb your day. So I just would like to request you, though, if anybody has any reflections, some impression that you got from this discussion today that you're going to walk away with, or maybe it reminds you of something else. I like reflections first, more than questions. There's someone, Param and Taruni, wrote here. It's a question, it looks like. Let me just read this out to everybody. Hare Krishna, a basin says, Glories to Prabhupada, how can we help to protect a friend's enthusiasm who is associating with someone in authority who has been proven to not be in good standing? The friend has recently returned to the movement after a leave of some years. The reason for their leaving was being previously hurt by another person in authority who was proven to not be in good standing. So that's a very practical question. We see that a lot. We probably all of us know someone who's been married more than once, maybe a girl who's very romantic, and she just very eager to fall in love with a guy. And you see the guy that she's associating with, he's not a good guy. but you can't say anything to her because she's really enthusiastic for it. And then, and maybe you try even, but she won't listen to you. And then it turns out the guy is a rascal and he cheats on her, he beats her, he does something, and it breaks her heart. But then sometimes she goes on to another guy, and you see the next guy is also a loser. So what can you do? We can tell people so many things. We can say so many things to people, but ultimately, the best thing we can do is to show good example. Because a lot of people, honestly, they just, I don't know about you, but here I am doing a Zoom class, but I'll tell you honestly, a lot of people don't want to listen to me. And I can go and tell them, Prabhu, you should do this or that. And they'll say, leave me alone, shut up. That's a common thing, isn't it? You can't speak to someone who doesn't want to hear from you. So then what can you do? All we can do is be a good example. And be someone who has some genuine utsaha, genuine enthusiasm for bhakti from good association. Be a good example. And they'll always remember that. And even if such a person becomes discouraged and they go away and maybe they come back and then again they find some other leader person that, because they're attracted, they're thinking that success in bhakti means to be a big leader, to have a lot of money, to have a position. And the persons they're associating with are not good. And then they lose, then when they find out this next person wasn't good either, sometimes they lose inspiration and they go away. But if they see that you're steady, if they see that you're enthusiastic, that you have confidence, that is the best way to affect them. As St. Francis of Assisi once told some of his followers, one of my favorite sayings, he said to them, you should go out and preach. And he said, and if necessary, you can also say something. In other words, real preaching doesn't mean just talking, but it means, what are you doing? People looked at that, okay? And Bongani was asking if he could have a question. He says, the subject matter of the appearance and disappearance of the super soul Lord Sri Krishna is a mystery even for the great sages. Therefore, his appearance and disappearance are simultaneously going on. And no one can say definitely which of them is the beginning and which is the end. His eternal pastimes have no beginning or end. And one has to learn of them from the pure devotee only and not waste valuable time in so-called research work. Would the Srimad Bhagavatam and Bhagavad Gita be considered as research work? So what does it mean here, research work? The gopis of Vrindavan are doing research work. They're researchers. What is their research? Is Krishna hiding behind this tree? Is he behind that bush? Where is he at right now? Has anybody seen him? Tell me. They're doing research. Research is not bad, but research which is based on our dull material senses, research which is based on the conception of happiness, which we think we get through material sense gratification, that research, that's rejected. So we must do research in Bhagavatam and Bhagavad Gita, but what kind of research? There's also mundane research we can do in Bhagavatam and Bhagavad Gita. And there are many, many scholars in the university who teach Bhagavatam and Bhagavad Gita. And they may even memorize verses and different things from it. They know different philosophical points, but they're not approaching it with this mood of humility, this mood of crying out to the Lord. And therefore, Vishidantam idam vakyam uvacha madhusudan. Bhagavad Gita really begins when we break down and we're honest and we cry. Not just that we come and say, okay, Krishna, it wasn't that Arjun came to Krishna and said, okay, look, I got a fight today. And would you like to tell me a whole bunch of philosophy so I can memorize a bunch of stuff before I fight? That wasn't the Bhagavad Gita. Arjun's not asking Krishna, just tell me a whole bunch of philosophy that I can memorize. But he's pouring out his heart to Krishna, saying, I have problems. This is real. It's not just some theoretical thing. This is me. Please help me, help me. So I hope that helps. Anybody else with Any reflections or comments or anything? What you're walking
Hare
away?
Krishna, Hare Krishna Prabhu, thank you so much. I guess for me, one reflection, you spoke about one of the ingredients of enthusiasm was confidence. And I was wondering where that confidence would come from. And I thought about perhaps that confidence comes from knowledge, because when you have knowledge of a particular thing, you're confident to speak of it. And when you're confident to speak about something, then you are enthusiastic. So is that correct to say that confidence comes from knowledge, and that knowledge comes from reading Prabhupada's books in order to gain enthusiasm and confidence?
But we should understand there's two types of knowledge. There's Gyan and there's Vigyan. We can have theoretical knowledge. And at one point in America, people thought that in Africa, there were giant monsters and running and doing all the crazy. So that they may have some knowledge that they've acquired from someone, but it's not realized knowledge. And Krishna in the Gita, he says that we have to come to this point of realized knowledge. When we realize something, that's our goal, that's our purpose. And so we want to associate with people who have realized that. And this is why Gorka Shodas Babaji is such good association. He doesn't have a lot of Gyan knowledge because he couldn't read Sanskrit. He wasn't reading Bhagavad Gita or Srimad Bhagavatam, but he had Vigyan. He had realized knowledge. And that doesn't mean we shouldn't read Gita, but we should learn how to read Bhagavad Gita. We should learn how to read Srimad Bhagavatam. That we're reading it not to collect information, but we're reading that to solve our problems. We're coming just as Krishna in the 10th canto, he stole the clothes from the gopis who were bathing there. And he told them, so you come out of the water and stand before me with no clothes on. And the gopis were holding themselves like this. And Krishna said, now put your hands up in the air. And what does that mean? It sounds very lewd, very kind of erotic, but there's a purport to it. That when we come before God, when we come before Guru, Sadhu, we have to come naked. And we hold our hands up in the air. We're not trying to cover anything. We're not trying to hide anything. This is what I am. And I'm not trying to trick you. I'm not trying to pretend anything. Then that we can get a proper response to Krishna. Is that okay? Okay. So Leela Purushottam Prabhu is complaining that he can't unmute himself.
Let me help you out.
Hare Krishna. I was just wondering, because you went through one item by another from the third verse of Upadeshamrita, and somehow it connected to me with this verse, Krishna Bhakti Rasa Bhavita, where there is this word Laulyam mentioned. So I was thinking, would it be proper to understand that this word Laulyam consists of all of these 6 items, that there may be like symptoms of the Laulyam? Would that be a correct thinking or understanding?
I would have to think about that. I haven't seen any commentary like that. So just initially, I'm just going to be vague and not sign on for a yes or no. But Laulyam or greed, yes, Laulyam or greed we could say is a kind of synonym for utsaha or for enthusiasm or strength, because when you have so much lolya, we have so much greed. And yes, that greed comes when we're confident, when we practice patience, when we're following the right process, when we're following the acharyas, when given up bad association, then that lolyam comes, that greed, and that greed becomes so intense that the devotee just, I'm not going to wait. I'm sorry. Somebody says, no, you shouldn't move into the temple. You shouldn't start chanting japa until you're 40 years old or 50 years old. I'm sorry. I'm not going to wait. I got to do it now. I have to practice this now. I would say that. It's a nice thought, Prabhuji. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Let's see who else is here.
One,
Bala Nima.
okay.
Go ahead.
Just yeah, like because sometimes when we say this word utsaha or enthusiasm, it sounds with the material samskars that we have, it sounds rather like something passionate, you know, some. So I was wondering if, because we can see that devotees are slowly getting older, and it doesn't have to always express itself in that passionate way that we expect, you know, jumping 2 meters high in the kirtans and all these things. So in such a state, would it be proper to make it a synonym to determination, or think in these terms? You know, like that you are really determined to achieve the goal and then go on the path, and would it be equal to the enthusiasm like regarding the conditions of the body, say, or maybe not even only body, but like in that context?
Yeah, this is a point we're trying to make, that there's different types of enthusiasm, but we may have to be enthusiastic with our body, be enthusiastic with our mind, but all those material types of enthusiasm in the end are going to just end in frustration and suffering, and they're not real enthusiasm. So it's a very important thing, especially in the very beginning. Sometimes we think that, oh, I'm really advanced if I'm jumping 2 meters in the air and I'm memorizing all these verses. I'm doing things in a very passionate way to get respect. But then we see a lot of times those people, they end up leaving because they don't have this utsaha. They don't have enthusiasm, or utsaha meaning they don't have the strength, this force to do it, because they're living in an illusion and they're not doing good association. That's good. Let me go on here. Bala Nimai, nice name. He's Hare Krishna Prabhu, thank you much. Sometimes a devotee might seek to expand their influence in order to reach more of the wider public in need of bhakti. Is this a correct approach for one who wishes to be sincere? Bhaktivinoda Thakur, in one place, he said that if I'm not actually practicing what I speak, it's better if I lock myself in the room and preach to myself. Now, that doesn't mean that we should just close down our movement. I'm not practicing anything properly. All the Harinam devotees will say I'm not really on that platform, so I'm just going to lock ourselves in the room. It doesn't mean that, but it means don't push ourselves forward. Be shy about doing that. The principle of laja means shyness, is very helpful in this regard in bhakti. And if Guru and Krishna want to push us forward, let them do that. I personally, as you can understand, I think, am a little dubious about the need of propagating myself or advertising myself with the idea this is going to help a lot of people. What I generally find happens when you broadcast yourself like that, you attract people who also want to broadcast themselves, who also want to promote themselves, and they think this is the whole purpose of things. And it may be some benefit that they get to chant Hare Krishna. And frankly speaking, Srila Prabhupada, I could give you some references to this. Prabhupada engaged many devotees who had such passion, who wanted to promote themselves. And they did a lot in some ways to help people to get some beginning of bhakti. And I stress the word beginning, meaning they begin to chant, but they haven't come to the point of introspection yet. Until we've given up that pride, how can we be introspective? We're a bahir muktim, we're an external person, we're not being internal. So I'm very dubious about that. It may be beneficial sometimes, but my humble suggestion is they say, sadhu sabadana. My dear sadhu, be careful. Be careful promoting yourself like that. We've seen a lot of devotees promote themselves, and who knows where they are today. So let me go on. I'm sorry if I don't pronounce the names properly. I'm just an ignorant person. Please forgive me. Shosalanam said, Hare Krishna Prabhu, how do we protect those who come with enthusiasm, thinking that everyone is a pure devotee, and they go way beyond their limitation to serve, because once they see the truth, it tends to remove them from the path of bhakti? Well, we have to have some respect. And in the beginning, it's a fact. Sometimes devotees, you go to the temple and you're so happy and so excited because you think everybody's a pure devotee. Oh my God, it's amazing. And you're just so happy. But then after some time, somebody comes and whispers in your ear, you know, that guy, man, that Leela Purushottam, don't listen to him. You know what the history is. He did this, he did that. Oh. And they tell you so many things. And it's coming from a devotee that you respect. And then you think, oh my God, I guess they're not all pure devotees. And maybe I should even be really careful who I associate with. In Braj, many demons came. And sometimes the demons came dressed as devotees. Putana came dressed as a devotee. Vatsasura came dressed as a devotee. Palambasura came dressed as a devotee. Shankachuda came dressed as a devotee. And in different places, our acharyas have described that the Brijbasis, even Mother Yashoda and Rohini, thought that those were actual devotees. They thought Putana must be a great devotee. She really loves Krishna. Now, how is it they couldn't recognize who's good and who's bad? How do we understand this? How do we understand the boys really thought Vatsasura was a calf? Pralambasura was really a cowherd boy? Because they're simple. Them and us. They were depending on Krishna. And in their sincerity, they just accept anyone who comes and chants Hare Krishna, anyone who comes and wants to serve Krishna as a great devotee. And they're ready to give respect to them. But because they're dependent on Krishna, they're taking shelter of Krishna, they're protected. We can't understand who's a devotee and who's not a devotee. Therefore, we should always preach to respect everyone, be amanina manadena, respect everyone, don't try to judge them, and depend on Krishna. And Krishna will whisper in your heart sometime, look, don't listen to this guy. There's something wrong here. Okay, I want to go on. Ishvara Kripa, Hare Krishna, nice to see you. She says you use the word Oriya or Bengali for crying of the soul. Sorry? That's, what is it? Atma Krandana. Atma means the self, and Krandana means to cry. So it's a crying of the soul. This is an existential cry, existential meaning. Who am I? Why am I here? This is really from my gut. This is the beginning of our bhajan. And this is why Bhaktivinoda Thakur, looking back what I was speaking about, this verse, you may remember, Jata Shraddha Makatasu, where Krishna says to Uddhava, even if you can't practice, even you're doing sense gratification, just keep remembering me and keep doing bhakti. Bhaktivinoda says, this is our qualification for chanting. This is our only qualification. Our qualification is our disqualification, that I identify myself as being very bad. She goes on. Secondly, we see a lot of devotees quoting Srila Prabhupada's letters or his books. When we read the quotation, we feel the subject matter is different. But when we go back to the full quotation, it refers to something else. Is it correct to do that? Well, that's a difficult question. Sometimes we can take something out of context, and in the broader context, it may have another meaning. But sometimes our acharyas do that. Sometimes Srila Prabhupada does that. Many times our acharyas do that. If it works, and if if the principle is a good principle, that's beneficial. But on the other hand, if it's duplicitous, if we're taking just what's called artakukuti nyaya, the logic of half a hen, that I like the front half of the hen that eats or that gives eggs, and I don't like the front half.
Hare Krishna Prabhu, I think we lost you there.
Yeah, I'm back again. I'll just finish with this final thing. He said you should hear, read, write, speak. First of all, we hear from a proper person. And then we should read to check what they're saying. Make sure, was it out of context? Is it proper? And by reading it, also we remember what we've heard. We want to hear from a proper person. And then we should write it down. And then by writing it down, he said, we'll understand it. And then after writing it down, we should speak it. And then by speaking it, that'll come to us. It'll belong to us. Okay? So I think I should stop there. I want to thank you very much, Prabhuji, and the devotees. I hope this is some use for you.
Thank you so much, Prabhuji, for those very practical, very clear and impactful words. I, for one, am definitely feeling more enthusiastic. And I will take...
I'll make one comment. That we may do kirtan, but you also have to have Krishna Katha. If all you do is kirtan, you have no conception, no philosophy, no understanding, you may lose enthusiasm. So both are required.